Good day to you. God bless you. Say, welcome to the Shepherd's Chapel. Welcome to this family Bible study hour, ready to get back in our Father's Word. Jacob faring pretty good with his father-in-law Laban, who also was his uncle. And his cattle deal is coming along real good because he was practicing some of the first animal husbandry mentioned in the Father's Word. And you know, some are going to say, well, he was cheating a little bit. No, now don't get nervous. You're going to find out this was God's idea, okay? You're going to find out that God arranged it. Why? God arranged it because he was blessing Jacob. And old Laban was trying to use him and deceive him, and God observed and saw to it that Jacob always ended up with the better end of the deal. We'll prove it in the next chapter. So we'll pick it up with chapter 30, verse 41. Let's go with it. And it reads, "And it came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods." In other words, he had his streaked and speckled rams and he-goats there, and he only bred the stronger animals. 42, with his markings, okay, 42. "And when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's." I mean, he engineered the thing pretty good, all right? 43, "And the man increased exceedingly, and had much cattle, and maidservants, and men servants, and camels, and asses." He was naturally, because of his method of animal husbandry, farming, and taking care of things, but let's not forget the main thing, God's blessings. Beloved, it is so important that you have God's blessings on your family. That's the way you succeed. It is with his blessings that you have the ability, the know-how to be successful at basically whatever it is God would lead you into. Chapter 31, verse 1, and we just continue right on. "And he heard the words of Laban's sons," in other words, they're grumbling over there, saying, "Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this, which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory." Everything he owns came from our dad. Well, now, their dad didn't have all that much when Jacob showed up on the scene, all right? Again, I will say, the little old girl named you is the one that took care of the flock. So now they have to have many people taking care of the flocks. Verse 2, "And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, looked at his face, no smiles coming his way. And behold, it was not toward him as before." I mean, it had cooled off big time. Laban was probably a pretty good old boy, but I'll tell you what, he was cunning. He wanted to make sure that he dealt in such a way that Laban was always ahead of the game. 3, "And the Lord said unto Jacob," now this is here again is direct instructions from our Father, okay? "Return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, that I will be with thee." I mean, you can't ask for it any better than that, my friend. If God is going to be with you, that makes it complete. That makes it God's will. You know you're doing the right thing, and you know God's going to protect. But many people overdo when you say God will protect. He still expects you to utilize common sense and take care of yourself, okay? In other words, if you can knock a bully off your back, don't expect God to do it. Verse 4, "If it's a bully you can't knock off your back, then perhaps God will do it for you," okay? There's things, many times God expects you to understand the processes of elimination, meaning equalizers as well. to equalize the size of the bully. Okay, verse 4. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock. This is going to be a secret meeting. He calls the two that are the closest to him, and they are his wives. And unfortunately, kind of hate to put it this way, but their father sold them. Father sold them to Jacob. Verse 5. And said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. In other words, he is leading me, he's guiding me, he's instructing me. Verse 6. And you know that with all my power I have served your father. All my might, I've tried to do what is right, to please him, to make him prosper, that I earn my way. Okay? Verse 7. And your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. He's always dickering with the wages. But God suffered him not to hurt me. God wouldn't permit it. Okay? God always observed. Well, let's face it, Jacob was pretty good at covert activity himself. He didn't have all that much trouble operating. 8. If he said thus, the speckle shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said thus, the ringstake shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ringstake. In other words, that's kind of like I saw to it, but he had some other help as well. Verse 9, thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. In other words, God has made me wealthy as well as the father. He earned them, okay? Verse 10, and it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived that I lifted up mine eyes and saw in a dream. This is why I told you it was God's idea that put it in his head. Listen. And behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ringstraked, speckled, and grizzled. Grizzled, dapple gray. 11. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. Verse 12. And he said, Lift up now thine eyes and see. All the rams which leap upon the cattle are ringstraked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. These were divine instructions. When Jacob went down and peeled the poplar and so forth and made his corrals and his chutes, it was the idea was given to him by God himself through the angel of the Lord. So we really can, you want to be careful in judging someone that's calling him a Sharpie because it was God that told him how to do it, okay? Very successfully. 13. I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar. In other words, God's still speaking to Jacob, where you slept on that pillar, and then you anointed it for a pillar, and called it Bethel, house of God. I'm there, and where thou vowest a vow unto me, now arise and get thee out of this land and return to the land of thy kindred. I want you out of here. Now, of course, they're doing this kind of secretly. He sent for his wives and had them meet him in the field. And remember, it was Laban that said, I want them set quite a ways over apart. Mainly because he had all pure cattle and he didn't want the ringstraked and all of them mixed up with his. Although, inasmuch as Jacob and Almighty God kind of took care of business, it wasn't exactly as Laban felt. Verse 14, and Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Verse 15, are we not counted of him strangers? He treats us like foreigners. We're his daughters. He doesn't pay any attention to us. For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. The dowry, the whole thing, he kept it himself and sold us. Now, you can see that these two girls, they as well felt they had been, well, you could almost say prostituted if you wanted to. I mean, they felt like they had been sold out by their father, and they didn't receive any of the dowry. Verse 16, and for all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours and our children's, now then, whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. You do it. You carry on. Well, what they're kind of saying here, our father's mistreating us in the first place. You're the husband. Whatever God, who is blessed, it was obvious, had blessed them and made them rich, you do it. Verse 17, and then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon camels. 18, and he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting. None of them were Laban's, you understand? They were all of his getting, legally and so forth, which he had gotten in Padamaram for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. In other words, they were saddled up, they were ready to travel, and they were going to travel. Why? Well, God had ordered him to. Now, again, many would say, well, wonder why God was so good to Jacob that he would give him hand-on information. Well, hey, he's been there 20 years. Okay, and he worked 14 of those years for the wives, and the other 6 or 7 for cattle that he would be taking with him. And now he, without saying goodbye, the contract is over, he's leaving out. Okay, and some might say, well, why? Because God told him to. That's why. And as you know, if a man's countenance is against you, he did not know what to expect from Laban or Laban's sons. Evidently, those sons, not necessarily Laban, but those sons were saying some pretty hard things that they would like to do. 19. And Laban went to share his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. Now, Rachel, of course, should not have done this. She stole. But do you know what? They were teraphim, which is house gods, not our father. So it lets you know Laban was a heathen worshiper. He worshiped something other than Almighty God himself. And Rachel did not take these because they were teraphims, gods, but because they were gold. She intended to have some of her heritage, and she took them. She was a pretty sharp gal. She figured she had them coming. Verse 20, and Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian. He was not a Syrian, he was of Abraham, his brother, that is to say, Nahor, but he did live in Syria. In that he told him not that he fled. They just slipped away in the night, and there was quite a few miles between them. But now Laban's gone out to share the sheep, so he's going to find out. 21. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river, this would be the Euphrates, and he set his face toward the Mount Gilead, the rocky region. He took off in that direction. He's headed home. Verse 22. And it was told Laban on the 3rd day that Jacob was fled. They're gone. I mean, they have moved everything. 23. And he took his brethren with him and pursued after him 7 days' journey. It was 3 when he found out, and it takes him 7 days to catch up to him. And they overtook him in the Mount Gilead. 24. And God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night. This is God taking care of Jacob, okay? And said unto him, take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. In other words, don't you go trying to lay some curse on him or getting angry at him or anything of that nature. You be real careful what you do. Now, when God spoke to Laban, that might pull him away from his little teraphim gods, and decide that there was a little more to Jacob's God, and he knew that Jacob was blessed by God. So he would listen. 25. Then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brother pitched in the Mount of Gilead. They kept them a little distance there, and they're no doubt stalking each other and sizing each other up. 26. And Laban said to Jacob, what hast thou done that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Now that's a lie. That is an absolute lie. Jacob has taken away his daughters. They're not his daughters anymore as far as parentship, as ownership. I'll use the term, though it's distasteful to me. Jacob bought them, married them. They were his wives. And as if Jacob had armed himself and taken them by force, the girls were ready to go. Again, Laban is kind of a Sharpie, okay? What is he doing? Well, he's going to make it seem that this whole thing is Jacob's fault. And it's called the old passing the blame game, okay? Verse 27, wherefore didst thou flee away secretly and steal away from me? That means haste away from me. And didst not tell me that I might have sent thee away with mirth and with songs, with tabret, and with harp? We could have had a big party, a big send-off, I'll bet. Okay, verse 28. I mean, he would have tried to sharp him into 7 more years for some reason, all right? 28. And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters? Thou hast now done foolishly in so doing. Now, Jacob hadn't done foolishly. If anything, Laban was very neglectful of his daughters, his grandchildren, and his countenance had fallen. He wasn't even being friendly to Jacob. So he's really playing the old pass the blame game here, okay? Don't overlook that fact. 29. It is in the power of my hand to do you hurt. I could harm you. But the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. I was warned by your God. This lets us know that Laban didn't put all of his faith in those house gods. Okay, verse 30. And now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house. He knew it. Laban knew he was homesick. Yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods, lowercase g. Got it? Now, understand, Jacob doesn't know that Rachel has these gods. There is one thing Jacob would not do, and that is steal. He is going to be a very unhappy camper at that statement. Very unhappy. Almost ready to fight, quite frankly. 31. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, peradventure thou wouldest take by force thy daughters from me. He's giving the reason he slipped away undetected. 32. With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, your little old teraphim, let him not live. Before our brethren discern thou what is thine with me. Well, you discern among us, look, and take it to thee, for Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. Now, unfortunately, Jacob probably passed the death sentence on Rachel when he says this. It would not be the father that would detect that she was the one that had them, but she would, with the birth of Benjamin, she would die. She was taken, which would be a while down the road here. Verse 33. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the two maidservants' tents, but he found them not. And then went he out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. 34. Now Rachel had, she's sharp, okay? Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture. This is a saddle, we'll call it, okay? And a very comfortable woman's saddle. And set upon them, and Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. She's sitting on them. 35. And she said to her father, let it not displease my Lord, that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. And he searched, but found not the images. His deceit was tricked by his own daughter's deceit, okay? Maybe we should just call it shrewdness, okay? 36. And Jacob was wroth and code with Laban. This means he was ready to fight. Okay. He was hot with anger because he had never stole anything in his life. And here he's under this accusation. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? You treat me like a criminal. He was an unhappy camper, okay? His temper was triggered. 37. Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both. You just lay her out there. Let's see what I've stolen from you. Well, Jacob knew he hadn't stolen anything from him, supposedly. 38. This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of thy flock have I not eaten. I've never taken one of your animals for food. 39. That which was torn of beast I brought not unto thee. I took the loss. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. This means whether it was by day or night, not necessarily as we take the word stolen, all right? He was always on guard. If something died or was killed or lamed, he took the cost. 40. Thus I was. In the day the drought consumed me, it was hot out there and dry. And the frost at night, it was cold, and my sleep departed from mine eyes. It was very uncomfortable out there. I did this for you, is what he's saying. 41. Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle. And thou hast changed my wages 10 times. You never were really square with me. Hey, Jacob's kind of laying it on the line here to the old boy, his uncle. 42. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hadst sent me away now empty. God hath seen mine affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. In other words, my Father, the Heavenly Father, that allowed me to slip away with my goods. He knew Laban would try to rip him off for everything he had. 43. And Laban answered and said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children which they have borne? How, here he's kind of playing tender heart here. How could I hurt my own? It's mine. It wasn't his. That's what Jacob just got through telling him. I sweated in the daytime and froze at night, earning ownership. I suppose ownership is not a good word as far as the daughters is concerned, but the fact that he earned them his dowry as wives, they were his. 44. Now therefore come thou, let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be for a witness between me and thee. In other words, Laban now, he sees that it's the game is up. And he is he does respect the God in heaven. Verse 45, and Jacob took a stone and set it for a pillar, again, a mark. For this will end up being a boundary, a border. 46, and Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones, and they took stones and made an heap. And they did eat there upon the heap. They had a covenant feast. Okay, it will be kind of a friendship that none will cross the line to do harm to the other. A thing of kinship. 47. And Laban, there'd be Laban talking here, called it Jigar Shahabdutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. Now, what you've got here, and it's kind of interesting, you have two languages. You have Laban speaking Chaldean, and you have Jacob speaking Hebrew. And both words mean the same thing, that is to say, being translated witness heap. In other words, this is where the covenant is, and this is where the witness is in both languages, Chaldean, Syriac, or Aramaic, whatever you want to call it, and Hebrew, both words. 48. And Laban said, this heap is a witness, that's between me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it called Gilead in the Hebrew, meaning the witness heap, okay? 49, and Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. The watchtower is, Mizpah meaning rigidly to keep them apart, okay? That there would be no harm. They would not cross and would watch out for no harm for each other. 50. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives beside my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. This is our covenant. 51. And Laban said to Jacob, behold this heap, and behold this pillar, which I have cast betwixt me and thee. In other words, this is our covenant, this is our contract. Take note of it. observe it. Now this is going to be, this is important in as much as, even though Jacob, he was hot, but this will cool him down, and they will have this covenant of agreement that there will be no war betwixt them. And how could it be? Because they were strictly blood kin, all right? 52, this heap be witness, and this pillar be witness, that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and that thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. That is that's the point of the whole thing, that there would be no harm come to either of them. It didn't say you can't ever come visit with me, but past this point for harm, no, can't happen. 53, listen carefully, interesting words. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge betwixt us. And Jacob sware by the fear of his father Isaac. So you see, Laban he was not all for it. Probably, if we were to know, maybe the reason Laban had the little teraphim house gods was because they were gold, because he had an eye for that had value. Okay. But here Laban himself speaks in the name of the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the two brothers. Laban being out of the house of Nahor, and of course Isaac and Jacob being out of the house of Abraham. And this is the pillar, the heap of the witness, that between those two houses, Nahor and Abraham, there would come no harm. Let that be set. And we'll go two more verses real quickly to finish this chapter. 54, then Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mount and called his brethren to eat bread. And they did eat bread and tarried all night in the mount. What was he doing? Thanking God. Don't you ever forget it. God had cut him free from the bondage and the service to Laban. And he had accomplished what he went there to do, to gain a wife, to be away from his brother Esau, and he was rich all at the same time. Why? God was with him. 55 to complete. And early in the morning Laban rose up and kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them, and Laban departed and returned unto his place. And so it was, so it is. Our Father, in tracing this family, and it's very important, you want to note how he protects them, how he makes them successful. For, do you know something? This was long ago, but maybe not all that long ago. But you see, the beauty is, God never changes. He was the same that day. He was the same between that day and this day. And he is the same this day. He looks after his children. He is a loving Father. But until you learn the history of our people and why God led as he led and prospered as he prospered, corrected and chastised as he corrected and chastised, then it's difficult to pick up on the love of our Father. Don't miss any of these lectures in Genesis. All right, bless your heart. You listen a moment, won't you please?